Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 91. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. And we're excited to have with us the award-winning indie author, certified shamanic practitioner, Sarah Woodard. Sarah, how are you doing?
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we were talking before we went on the air. You now, in a previous interview, you said that your job, what you want to do, not your job, your goal is to produce 300 children's books.
Correct.
And you are now at 30, and you're going to be releasing number 31 tomorrow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And just for the record, I did not pull that number out of my behind. That is how many books Richard Scarry published. And I think he's pretty amazing. And I want to be at least as amazing as he is. Right. So, or was, I should say. But yes.
So talk to us, because I've been just enthralled by just, you know, reading about your background and learning.
I mean, clearly, because you forgot to do your intro.
That part will probably the part we were talking before we intro. Maybe I'll put that. That'll be a good outro. That'll be a good outro segment. I'll put in like behind the credits there.
There you go.
But I was been fascinated by the fact that you started working on. You've been working, as we say, 30 books so far, children's books. But you have a pretty long and storied, career as we said, like working on some other books about, spirit guides.
Yeah.
And you've also been very focused as well on things that as what your editor friend said, like eco-activist themed books.
Yes.
And
yes, well, the eco-activists are all kids' books.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So give people a bit of a background and kind of to way to just kind of give people a little bit of a kind of a history how you got into writing all these books.
Sure. So I won't tell you my entire life story because we don't have time for that, but I do need to roll back to childhood for just a quick second. So I know it doesn't seem like it now, but I was very, very shy as a kid, like to the point of would not talk to my parents if there was other people around. Okay. We're talking like painfully shy. And so for me, recess at school was a lot of me sitting alone on the playground, talking to the rocks and the plants and the trees and the bugs and whatever. And it took me a long time to grow out of that. I mean, I'm almost 42. So it took me a while to come out of that, but it became a very important piece of my story as a human, because as I found my voice, which was partially, a lot of it was through working with spirit, I also felt the need to give a voice to nature and the trees and the rocks and the plants and anyone really who doesn't have a voice, right? Minorities and all of that. And all of a sudden, now that I have my voice and I can roar, I want to roar for everybody, right? And so that's kind of how that started. But the spiritual piece became very important because that was how I found my confidence and my purpose. Because we all have a purpose, right? But most of us, like, we're born knowing it. But by the time we get to be adults, we've had so many other societal things coming at us that we have completely forgotten whatever it was. So all of my spirit stuff kind of brought me back to that center, to that purpose. It took me a while, though, because at first it was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to help other people do this same thing that I just did. And maybe it's about healing animals or healing nature or this or that. But what I found out was all of that for me felt really nichey, because you have to kind of keep your conversations about that thing that you do. I want to roar for everybody. I want to talk about all the things. And the only way to talk about all the things was to write. And it made total sense, because in like 3rd or 4th grade, before I'd had all of the societal messaging tell me that I had to be a certain way and do a certain thing, I wrote an essay about why I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. So I was kind of just coming home to my roots, just like moving to Vermont. I feel like I just came home. Like Vermont picked me. I didn't pick Vermont. I never thought I was leaving the house I was in. I was there for almost 9 years and I thought I was going to die there. That was the plan, not morbidly, but like my plan was to live there forever. And I was sitting with spirit saying, but how do we get these books in hands? They're beautiful. And I'm so grateful for the words and I'm so grateful for my illustrator. But if nobody's reading them, they don't change anything. How do we get books in hands? And it took me a long time to really accept that I was being asked to move. But once I did, it was like, oh my God, what was I waiting for? I love Vermont. I should have been here all the time. I mean, I don't love everything, right? You're never going to 100% love everything, but that's why you get involved and try to make a difference, right? Whether it's, and you vote, right? And you do those things that you can do as a grown-up to try to change things in ways that matter.
Right.
So.
And so you mentioned too, and you mentioned before as well that you loved being, like, you thought you were going to be an educator, a teacher.
Yes.
You went into, getting a special education degree.
I did. Yep.
And at what point do you see this role as a teacher kind of being expressed as well as writing these books?
For sure. Yeah. I'm definitely I'm a teacher. My soul is an educator, but my expression is a teacher, is a writer rather. My heart was in the right place wanting to teach high school special ed. My skill set, my abilities, my sense of humor, not what the job requires. I will never forget. It was like they make you wait until your last semester before you're in front of a classroom, which is just ass backwards, if you ask me. And I hope I can say that on the air. And so literally I'm in my last semester. I got 2 degrees at the same time. So I was in school for extra time. I paid for it by myself.
Wow. Okay.
So in my last semester, after all this time and all this money, and I get in front of a classroom and I don't have any idea how to get them under control or just to sit quietly and pretend to listen even. And I'm literally standing there going, sit down. And one of the girls looks at me and she says, do you know your nostrils flare when you're angry? No, I didn't. Thank you so much. Can you sit now? Like, it was not working. I fought my way through because I'm not a quitter. So I fought, and I had paid all this time and all this money. I was getting that degree if it killed me.
Right.
So I did. I graduated with my degree in special ed and my degree in social science. And I walked across that stage and I took my diploma and I never used them again.
And do you see that? So how do you balance? And is it one and the same, or these two distinct different roles of being an educator but also an advocate? Because a lot of your books also have an advocacy piece to it as well.
So I would say they're not the same role, but they are connected. You can't advocate for something if you can't also teach about it, because a big piece I have discovered of being an advocate is meeting people at their current knowledge and explaining the truth, whatever that is, right? Mm-hmm. And hoping they change their minds, because you can't ever force anyone to change their mind. But hopefully, if you have an open-minded person in front of you and you present them with information that's new, or present what they know but in a different way, they will change their mind on their own. Mm. So the two go hand in hand, but they are different roles.
Right.
And some advocates do things that I don't do, right? Like they'll go and march in the streets. That's not so much me, but they will do that. And they're just as much an advocate, maybe not as much a teacher.
Right.
Right. Some teachers teach in the classroom and they just teach the curriculum that they're told to teach, and they don't question whether or not it's actually valid because that's their job, is to teach it. That's a teacher, not an advocate. But they can go hand in hand, and I personally think that they should.
And so let's look at your list of books that you have out here so far.
The giant list.
The giant list. So we have you up here as like, and I love this one. This is that's
on Book Club. Yep.
Yeah. Book
and they
Club.
lay it out really nicely.
So you have on here, as we say, so Tommy's transformation. So far as of this recording, which is July 6th, you have put out 9 books in 2021.
I'll take your word for it.
So I guess the question is, like, we have a lot of authors that listen to it or watch this program. They're questioning, and the question is like, how are you able to make these
so fast?
Yeah.
No, and it's a valid question. It totally is. And first of all, let's recognize these are not 1,000+ page novels, right? Those are obviously going to take longer because there's just literally more typing to do, right? I mean, never mind, all of the other work involved. There's literally just more words to type. So they're, of course, going to take longer. But also a lot of it really goes back to my process, right? Because a lot of writers fall into this pattern where they carve out a time of day and they go and they sit in front of their computer, or they sit with a notepad or whatever it is, and they force themselves to try to write, like NaNoWriMo, right? That's what that's all about, is sitting down and forcing yourself to write a certain number of words. I say that's not valid. I say that's actually stamping on your own creative abilities, because that comes through. I don't care if you call it working with spirit. I don't care if you call it your muse. Call it whatever you want. But that only comes through when you're at ease, when you're relaxed, when you're comfortable. This is why in college, I had a roommate who, if she was writing an essay and she got stuck, she would take a shower. There was some nights she'd take 3 showers in one night, but she'd finish the damn essay. Because taking a shower relaxed her enough for her brain to go, ah. And then inspiration comes, right? You're singing and driving in the car, and all of a sudden you get inspiration, or you think of something or whatever, right? That's why that happens in those moments, because you're not forcing your brain to try to do a thing.
Right.
So I don't do that. I get inspired. Usually it means I got pissed off about something and I'm literally sitting in my house, like reading something on social media, cursing at my phone as if it matters. And then I say, okay, if that's a book, I will be ready for it when it shows up. And I will be doing something completely unrelated, like making tea or having a shower or driving in the car or feeding the cats or whatever it is. And boom, the book shows up and I have to go, okay, either like I literally one time I got an inspiration for the book. Actually the one that's coming out tomorrow. I actually got the inspiration in the shower, like as I was starting the shower, and I'm like, okay. And I literally said the first line or two that was in my head over and over again, out loud, walking through my house, finishing showering, drying my hair, putting on clothes. Then I sat down and typed, but I said it out loud over and over again so I wouldn't lose it between then and when I could sit down. But I do try to stop immediately and catch it, because otherwise it can leave, right? But right. It usually comes back too if it leaves. So it's not the end of the world, but it's frustrating.
Right. And that's Little Bear's Scary Day, right?
Yes. The one coming out tomorrow is Little Bear's Scary Day. Actually, the ebook is already out because those go faster, but the paperback should be out tomorrow.
Wow. Okay.
Assuming there's no issues.
Right.
So yeah, because I'm just like open and ready to catch the words basically when they show up.
Right.
It goes faster because I'm not pressuring myself. And my illustrator is freaking amazing. And he was doing 2 pages per day. He just recently figured out how to do 3 pages in a day. I don't even know. I can't even imagine. I can't draw anything. So I can't even imagine illustrating 3 pages in a day. So they'll even be coming faster, which is amazing because I have a backlog of about 33, I think. So
you have that was my other question. How many scripts do you have? You have a 33 backlog?
Thereabouts. Yeah. Well, let me see. Yeah, thereabouts. Because I think my editor just finished going through number 64. So
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's your team, your editor and Carlos Lopez.
Yep. And obviously Spirit. Yep.
And Spirit. Yep.
And the plushies and the cats. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have also, like, how did you, so you're the question before we went on the air, you're talking about how Carlos's work is kind of now part and parcel. It's very much identified.
We have not met in person. So when I say married, I don't actually mean we have rings on each other's fingers, but we are married in the sense of professionally, I think. Yeah.
Right.
First of all, his work is very distinctive. I mean, you've got all of those pictures up on your screen and they have a certain feel to them that's very different from most of the other work out there.
Right.
People, if you're scrolling through social media and you come across that, you're going to know it's mine before you stop and read it.
Right.
And he also has a very similar process. Like, I sent him the text for the book. He sits down and reads it. And then he does yoga or meditation or however it is he taps into his version of whatever spirit is.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets the images that way. I very rarely have to change anything. And when I do, it's because I'm going for realism in some way. Like, do you have it up there? I think if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the Old Man and the Watcher right there in the middle.
Right.
So that's actually based on the Old Man of the Mountain and the Watcher, which is another mountain, both in New Hampshire. He's never seen them in person. He lives in Venezuela. He's never seen them in person. So I had to send him pictures from which he tried to imagine, like the Old Man, it was just the profile, right? So he had to try to imagine what the rest of the face looked like. Same thing with the Watcher. She's just a profile.
Right.
He had to try to imagine the rest of the face. And he'd never, like, in Venezuela, the trees are very different there, right? So because he didn't have the realistic experience, there was some corrections I had to make because I wanted it to be like the true realism of those mountains.
Right.
But that's not his fault, right? Like, how would he know? So, but generally speaking, I don't have corrections. I don't have changes. I just go, wow, how'd you do that?
So I guess then the question is, like, an authors might ask is, how did you find him in the first place?
The magic of the internet. So, I forget the site now. I think it was freelancer.com, maybe one of those sites. I don't even know if they still do this because he and I have been working together since like 2017. But back then they let you do this thing where you could run a contest and you basically set the terms of the contest.
Okay.
So I had uploaded like a couple of pages from my first book, Adri's Big Dream, and said, I wanted people to submit sample illustrations and they would win. I forget if it was like $20 or whatever they would win. And also the opportunity to work with me on future books if they won. Some of the stuff I got back, I'm telling you, I can't draw stick figures that look like things, but I could have done better than some of these things I got back. But he sent me this book. He sent me the illustrations for one of the pages. And actually, do you mind if I grab it?
So yeah, sure.
So he sent me these. And excuse me, cat. I just fell absolutely in love with him, with the work. He won the contest. He won the money. This was what he sent me.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, this was the stone one, right?
Yes. Yeah. Adri is a rock who wants to be a plant.
Yeah.
And it was actually just this flower piece that he sent. And I just knew, like, in my gut, my soul, I knew, like, this is the one. And we have worked together ever since.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And he must be happy to be working with an author that is.
Well, it's amazing for him because, like most freelancers, right? And I'm a freelancer with like other things. Like, we get paid when we get paid.
Right. Yeah.
But because it was very clear, like the first few books, I just paid him when the book was done. But after a while, like he kept, he started to get more comfortable with me. And he started, every once in a while, he would message me and say, hey, do you mind just paying me for what I've done so far? I need to get groceries or whatever. Of course, I don't mind. Right. I totally get that need. Yes, you have to eat because if you don't eat, you can't keep drawing. So selfishly, yes, I'm happy to pay you. So eventually I just said, what if I just paid you a certain amount each week? And then when the book is done, I'll just pay you the difference. And he says, you'd be willing to do that? I said, of course, we're going to be working together for the rest of our lives. It's fine. So now that's what I do. And it's actually easier for me too, because it means that there's not like a big chunk. Right. It's like little bits, bigger bit. Yeah. So it actually helps me with my budget too, to do it that way. So.
And did you have to set up like a contract or anything with him? Did you?
I mean, people probably should. I'm never going to advise you not to, but he and I did not. We just innately trust each other.
Right. Yeah.
You're not going to find that all the time. I highly recommend doing things with contracts because things happen.
Right.
But
Right.
People talk about soulmates in terms of like love attraction. He's my soulmate, and soulmate actually has nothing to do with love attraction. Like the true meaning of soulmate is just somebody who gets you at that deep level. Sometimes you wind up in a romantic relationship with them, but you do not have to. Right. He's my soulmate.
Right.
I have no doubt of that. And he actually has no doubt of that. Like we've talked about this. And I just don't feel the need to have a contract. Like our souls already signed one before we got here. So it's fine, you know?
Right. And so talk about how you like your inspiration. You say it comes in without expecting, and how, so, it's, artists of all kinds will talk about that, where like, the muse or the spirit or whatever it is will kind of hit you at that, maybe in an inopportune time. But are you the kind of person who will have kind of like a notepad next to your bed or something in the car, or how does that work?
I used to, but I actually have a really hard time sleeping. I've never been a good sleeper, even as a kid. Like the rule was you have to be in bed by this time. As long as you're quiet, you can do whatever you want. So I got really good at just being quiet. And I was a reader, right? I read in bed I still read in bed every night. The only way I can fall asleep is if I read in bed. And so because of that, I stopped keeping a notepad by the bed, because if I get that inspiration in the middle of the night and I wake up to write it down, I'm awake.
Okay.
I am awake. And so by removing that notepad, I also kind of created a boundary with spirit, because you are allowed to have boundaries with spirit. You're allowed to have boundaries with every single being. And so by taking that out of the bedroom, I created this boundary saying, you are not allowed to wake me up with this. Yeah. You're allowed to have like I'm vegan. I'm never going to say kill the ants that come in your house, but you are allowed to have boundaries and say ants are not allowed in my house, and seal off openings or whatever else, right? Like you are allowed to have boundaries with everything, and that includes spirit.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just, it's not always opportune, right? Like in the shower is not the best time, but it didn't wake me up.
Yeah.
And I didn't forget it when I got, I managed to, get it all done and still get the book. So it was fine.
Right.
But yeah, I don't keep the notepad because I need my sleep too.
So I'm really curious about, all these books, because you do mention, you compare it to the point of also like the, Richard Scarry, where,
yes,
the busy world. So
yes,
everything was kind of intertwined. Like you had recurring characters going through.
Yes. So his are different in that regard.
Okay.
All of mine stand alone. There are no intertwining characters. Although I will say, if you look carefully, sometimes the characters repeat in illustrations.
I was going to ask you, are there any Easter eggs for people that are...
There are Easter eggs, and I'm not going to tell you where they are. But sometimes a character in one book comes back as an illustration or a piece of an illustration in another book. Okay. Just saying.
Do you have any working on it, like say, like any sequels to it's any specific characters that you're just not done telling about?
Wow, yeah. So I have not actually announced this on my community yet. So you guys are hearing it first here.
Wow. Okay.
On Storycomic Presents, you're hearing it first. Get ready. So Ellie of the Woods, which if you scroll up, she's right there at the top of your thing. She's green right there. Yeah. So Ellie of the Woods. The whole premise is she is a child of the forest, and she's raised by nature. And one day she has to leave her woods and go out and do healing in the world, right? And that story literally was being illustrated as I was moving to Vermont. I didn't even know I was going to move when I wrote that book, okay? But Spirit knew. Yep. Spirit knew. And I have realized since being here that Ellie and I are the same. She is me, I am her, and her story is my story. And it does continue, but not as a children's book. It actually continues as a series of beginner chapter books. So for the kid that's not ready for a full-on novel,
cool.
The full, like the picture books are a little too babyish, like that in-between stage. there's right now there's 3. They're not out yet. I don't know when they're going to be out yet, so don't ask. but right now it's a series of 3 that continue her adventure. And they sort of mirror what I know my journey so far, at least what I know about my journey and where it's going and what I personally need to work on in order for that to happen.
Right.
So yeah, that one continues.
So talk to us a bit about one of the things you brought up in the previous interviews is that your challenge, you feel, is just like the marketing aspect is kind of the challenge.
Yes.
Is there, working on this, because one of the things that, beginning authors will have is or writers will have challenges in creating a brand with your relationship, with your, finding that one illustrator that kind of speaks to the theme and the pace of the stories you're telling. Is there a point where is there any ideas of working on larger marketing things with these books as well?
So I've actually been tackling that a little before I moved, but a lot since I moved. I have an Instagram coach, and she's really helped me not just with figuring out Instagram, which in and of itself is a little bit of a mystery when you're as old as I am. But also, she literally had to send me a video for how to trim the music in a reel because I had no freaking clue. She kept verbally saying, Sarah, you just moved the bar at the bottom. Well, the bar I was moving was the one that was actually moving as it played, and it wasn't working. Okay. So, but she doesn't just help with that. She's really helped me to define what my personal brand is. And it's stuffed animals, and it's play, and it's puppets, and it's fun. And to that end, I'm actually getting new branding pictures taken this month. Yay!
Oh, cool.
And I'm really excited because part of my identity and part of my brand, although you don't have to identify with this piece of it to enjoy the books, is also being vegan. And so we're actually going to a rescue farm in Benson, Vermont, and they have agreed to let us do the pictures there. And I'm going to bring all the stuffed animals, including Bliss, the 4-foot one that was in the bed with the
that giant one, yeah.
Who actually looks taller than me because his torso is taller than mine. And I have a reel with me dancing with him and whatever. So I'm going to put him in the front seat and just strap him in. And she's like, that's going to be a great photo. We'll take that as soon as you pull up. And so I'm getting I feel like I have identified a brand for myself now. But it did take a long time, in part because I was still sort of figuring out, are books the only thing? Not to say only to minimize them, but I've been blessed to have a lot of gifts in this life. And I really had to figure out, do I want to try to do all the things or not? And how to do that? And how do I show up? And so I had to really work through that and figure out what brings me the most joy. And what brings me the most joy is the books, because I can roar for everyone, right? And once I figured that out, it became this sort of a little painful process of peeling back the layers of myself to expose enough where people connect with me as a person, right? Because as a person brand, people have to connect with you. They have to be excited about you. They have to, right? And so, it's not like a company where you can hide behind a cool logo, right? There is none of that when it's a personal brand. And I had to really peel back those layers, and it was not always easy. Right. And it was not always fun. But now that I'm here, I'm feeling actually really good about the personal brand that I'm creating. And that's why I was like, all right, now I'm ready to get pictures, because I know who I am. I know what my brand is. I know how I need to show up. Right. So I'm actually really excited to kind of see how that shifts things.
And do you have, is there any other pieces of looking at it from that branding perspective? Is the, cards, or if there's, greeting cards or stickers or pins?
That would require more work from my illustrator, obviously, right. Which I kind of want to just keep him focused on the books, because 300's a lot. So, but I did have this woman who does stuff with like the cry cut machine. She actually made stickers based on like the graphics that I already use on my social media for all of my characters. So I've been sort of like places where I sell locally. I've been handing out stickers to them. But one of the places actually gave me this brilliant idea of stickers that say Vermont author, but are done sort of in my branding. So I'm having that same person do those because my illustrator doesn't have to design those. She can use stuff that's already there.
Right.
So that's it sort of for now. Like maybe I would love to have stuffed animals of all of my characters. Like not just like, hey, I found a donkey, so I'll use this one for my donkey book, but literally ones that are designed as the characters in the book. But that's like an extensive effort and down the road someday.
So talk to us a bit about also on your, as you say, there's 31, 30 now, 31st is coming out tomorrow.
Yes.
Which one of these books did you actually, not to say that you have to pick a favorite child or anything, but like, which one of these stories that just kind of like flew off the page for you? Like it didn't take you much, and which ones kind of you said, like your editor friend said, you got to tweak it a little bit here or there?
Well, they all always have tweaks.
Yeah.
I mean, in part because, as any writer will tell you, we all have our one mistake that we make every single time, right? And no matter what we do, we think we're doing it the opposite way, so therefore it's going to be right, and we still do it wrong. Like we all have that one thing.
And yours is punctuation, right?
Mine is punctuating dialogue.
Oh, punctuating dialogue. Okay.
Specifically, it's punctuating dialogue. I don't know what my mental block is about it, but literally every single thing that has dialogue in it has been tweaked because I just can't seem to get it right. This is why we have editors. Thank God for Abby, because I swear. And I always, when I email her the things, I'll always be like, FYI, there's a lot of dialogue or whatever. But I actually so I refer to it as like a birthing process with the books, right? And some of them are like that really easy labor where it's like, oh, did I just give birth? And some of them are like, oh my God, I was in labor for 72 hours and it was hell the entire time, right? So let me see. I'm trying to think what some of them have definitely been easier than others. I don't know. I'm leaning close because I'm reading your screen. It's funny. Like they say you forget labor pains. I wouldn't know, not being a mom, except to cats. But they say you forget labor pains, and I feel like that same thing happens with the books. I will say, so this one isn't out yet. It'll be coming out this winter. So I was raised the only Jewish kid in a town of really annoying Protestant, whatever. Graduated with 88 kids in my class, very small school. We, nobody had freedom to be themselves.
Right.
So I actually wrote a story that is about a Jewish girl and her sticking up for herself and her heritage and her religion. And it's really actually it's like my true life story, but I posit it as fiction in this children's book. That one, I felt it like spinning inside my body for probably a solid year and a half. That one was probably the hardest one to get on the page. And I don't know if it's because it was just my story and so personal or what it was, but it took me a long time for that one to break free. I actually talked to this woman that I only know through Instagram who does a lot of coaching for multicultural families about how to honor all the cultures involved in in both, whatever their heritage are. And she's also a children's author. And I was like, I need your help. I can't get this story out of me and I need your help. And just talking to her helped free it up for some reason. So that one was probably the hardest, but that won't be out until this winter because I'm aiming to release it around Hanukkah time. Okay.
And so what has there been any stories that, what's my question? What is your oldest story that hasn't been made into a book yet? Like, do you actually have a script? They're like, I'm going to wait for this one. I'll wait. I want to tell Carlos to do this one first. Do you have one?
So yeah, I definitely don't go in chronological order of how they were written. I was for a while, and then I realized it didn't always make sense to do that. So the one that's the oldest, I forget how far back it dates, but the one that's the oldest and hasn't been published yet is actually about the rainforest, and specifically about how our desire for all things palm, which people don't even realize, it's in everything. Palm oil is in food, it's in beauty products, and people think, oh, it's palm, it's vegan, it's plants. No, it's not, because you're destroying the orangutan's habitat and killing them at the same time. And I saw this image on social media of a mother orangutan pushing against this big bulldozer thing that was tearing down all the trees, trying to save her baby. First I got mad, then I cried, then I wrote a book. So, I don't know when that one will be out, but I know that when the time is right for it to come out, it will come out.
Right.
That one's definitely the oldest.
Yeah, it's kind of mentioned also with, like you mentioned, like almonds are not vegan as well.
They are not. Oh, they are not. So the orangutan one was actually written in 2020. That's my oldest one. Okay. I think. No, that doesn't make it. Wasn't written in 2020. It was written in 2019. I updated it in 2020. Almonds are not vegan either. People are under this delusion that they are, because they're not looking all the way back in the supply chain. And part of this is me, because in a previous life, when I had a real job, I worked in purchasing for a government contractor. And so we had to go trace things through the supply chain, because the government makes you certified to certain things, and you have to be able to prove it all the way through your supply chain.
Right.
So I'm sort of wired that way now. Almonds, if you go back through, they're not vegan, because the almond industry is actually the biggest killer of bees in the United States.
Wow.
If you're killing bees and you won't eat honey because you don't want to kill the bees, you can't eat almonds either. There's a logical disconnect. If you're not going to use honey because you care about bees,
right,
you can't have almonds if you care about bees.
Right.
If you're not vegan, maybe you don't care. But if you're going to be vegan, you got to have to look at stuff like that, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also though, I mean, like, peanuts are just as good as almonds are anyway. So
there's not peanut milk, but yes, for protein, peanuts are. Although people have allergies to peanuts and maybe not almonds. But frankly, if you ask me, I think almond milk is better than all of them. Right. Almond milk is the best. I mean, we all have different taste buds, and some people might not like it. I get it. Right. But to me, to my taste, I'm like, almond milk,
yeah.
Yeah.
So you came out with, as we say, it's your most recent book that came out last month in June was Tommy's Transformation.
Yes.
And before we went live, you were talking a little bit about its story.
Yes. So Tommy is a transgender turtle, and everyone, like, not everyone laughs, but the thing is, you don't know. There could actually be transgender turtles. Have you ever talked to a turtle? You don't know. There could be. But even if there's not, it's a kid's story. And the point is to help them understand things. And so Tommy, he's born in a male body, but he identifies as Tina. And when he's a little boy, he starts to wear his sister's clothes because he likes how he looks in the mirror as a girl. And as he gets older, his parents start to get all like, that's not okay. Like, take off those clothes, behave yourself, whatever. But he gets upset and whatever. And thankfully, his parents are aware and compassionate enough to send him to a turtle therapist. And the turtle therapist explains to Tommy that what he's feeling is totally normal, because some turtles, are born in bodies that look different on the outside from how they feel on the inside. And that's okay. And that he needs to tell his parents and so that he can be respected for herself at home. And still being Tommy in this moment, gets very upset. And so the turtle therapist helps Tommy/Tina tell his/her parents. And from that point forward, she is allowed to be Tina and identify as female, because that's what makes sense to her. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. This is good, because there's not a lot of children's books that kind of like talk about this.
No, there aren't. People feel like it's too complicated for kids, but it's funny. I've been divorced longer now than I was married. But when I was married, one of the things that when we would get into a fight, one of the things that my ex-husband used to say was, Sarah, you see the world and it's so black and white. And to me, it really is black and white. And I don't think that's a bad thing, at least for my career path, because kids see it as very black and white too. It is or it isn't. It's right or it's wrong, right? This is why every kid's story has a princess and a prince and like the hero and the bad thing that the prince has to fight off to save the princess, right? It's very misogynistic, but there's the good versus the evil. Even adult movies, right? There's always the good versus the evil. Well, that's black and white. That's a very black and white view. Could there be people who are meaning well and do bad things? Of course. But in a kid's world, you're either a good person or you're a bad person, right? You're a stranger or you're not. Kids break it down into that very simple, that's where their magic lies, right? Because they see it so black and white, they can look at an adult and go, yeah, but you're telling me it's wrong and you're doing it anyway. What? Right? And the parents are left going, because there's no way to answer that because they've literally broken it down to that black and white thing. And so as much as I'm sure it frustrated the hell out of my poor ex-husband, yeah, to me, it is very black and white.
Right.
Gender is not. Gender is very fluid. But the issue of whether or not people are allowed to identify however they choose to, that to me is very black and white. The answer is, of course they can. There's no question about that. Right. It is what it is. Look, you are whoever you feel inside, whether that's male or female or something in between, whether that's you feel old or young, whether that's you feel a particular call towards a religious way of being, whatever you feel inside is your truth.
Right.
And people need to be allowed to live that and honor that as long as they're not hurting anyone else.
Right. Wow. So Sarah, where can people find you if they want to learn more and just want to read more of your books? Sure.
So my social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest, and all of that is Sarah Woodard, Authoress, which if you have that up, that would be cool. And then, yeah, it's not, and unfortunately, BookBub doesn't let you pick yours, but if you have like Instagram or something open,
right,
just so people can see, but it's my name, Sarah Woodard, and then it's author, and then ESS, Authoress, like goddess or princess.
Okay.
I feminized it. And then the books are all on Amazon for people who are not local to the Brattleboro area. But if you are local, you can also find them at, let me see, we've got some at Everyone's Books, and they can order any of them. If there's something you want and you'd rather go through them, they can order any of them. There is one, last I checked, there's one copy of Bo Diddley at the food co-op in Brattleboro. There's a few at the Newfane store. And then just recently, I got 12 books into the Vermont shop on Main Street in Brattleboro. So if people are local, those are some options also.
And you also have a Patreon account as well.
I do. Thank you. Yes. Oh. So this is actually my biggest marketing challenge right now. We were talking about marketing earlier, and my biggest marketing challenge is a lot of people don't know what Patreon is or why it matters. But if people want to support the work, please do buy the books. But if you want to support the work and for whatever reason don't feel compelled to buy a book or whatever, Patreon is an amazing option. I highly recommend the $7 a month level because there's coloring pages.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
But and whatever level is always appreciated.
Right. Yeah, you got some you got some really nice levels on here too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
This has been great, Sarah. I'm so excited to be able to sit down and chat with you, and come back on next time.
I would love to.
Yeah, next when any of your books. I mean,
just literally pick a day because I'll have a book coming out within exactly. So literally pick a day.
Right. Yeah. So thank you very much, Sarah. And yeah, come back on. This has been great.
I would love to. This has been really fun. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Kids they are magical little containers of humanness. And
Right.
they have this ability to, if you explain things to them in a way that's not scary, they have this amazing ability to understand almost anything you put in front of them. Sometimes even better than you, the teacher, does. And then turn around and change the minds of the adults in their lives. Like, it's truly magic. They're just these tiny little magical beings. I remember, God, decades ago now, when I was still working a quote unquote real job, and one of my coworkers, I think her daughter was about 2 back then, maybe. And her husband was a smoker, but he always went out to the garage to smoke because he didn't want to do it in the house and he didn't want to do it in front of the kid, making his best effort to be a good role model, right? But around 2, 3, that's when they start to get curious about things. And she says, Dad, what do you always do in the garage? And he can't lie. But he also doesn't want his daughter to have the example of a smoker because he doesn't want her to smoke because he logically knows it's not good and not healthy. So he's in this like moment of like, what do I do? So he tried to, he explains, well, I do this thing and I go out, blah, blah, blah. And he explains. And she says, but Dad, that's so bad for you. Why do you do it? He had no answer. Like, he literally had no answer. Because A, how do you explain addiction to a child?
Right.
And B, even if you did, they're not going to accept that. They're just going to keep saying why, right? So literally the next day he went to the doctor and he got on Chantix or whatever they were pushing at the time so that he could quit because he could not continue to be that person for his child. Right. They're little tiny magical beings.
That's awesome.